Up till now, I've not used audio to communicate what's going on in my demonstrations on the premise that if it's simple enough to see, it's simple enough, and that's kind of what I'm going for in these micro updates. However, I managed to get significant amounts of progress done this week, and I want to dive a little bit deeper because a lot more of these features from now and into the future are going to tie into some slightly advanced concepts. Guess the word advanced is dependent upon your background, but um, going to be a little bit more involved in their development and implementation here on out. That said, let me describe to you what I've done so far, show you what I've done so far, and tell you where I want to go in the future. Now, what have I done so far? I've done two features in a proof of concept sense. I do need to scale them up in a more production friendly environment, so as I add them and build upon them, it is easier to do and is much more efficient. Those two concepts are animation and menu navigation, or more generally speaking, user interface. In the animation, I found that the SFML texture class has a very similar concept that the XNA libraries in C# have, known as a rectangle. Let me demonstrate by showing you what the texture looks like in its raw format. It's a .png, and I only have one texture utilizing the sprite sheet format because I'm just doing a proof of concept. I'll scale up when I have more time to draw. Opening up my very sophisticated tool, I have, let's see here, there we are. If you looked in the previews on those other images, you saw that there's just one square, but here you see a rectangle that is 3 squares long. That is the source sprite sheet. However, when I run the game, you will see that it still shows itself as a square, but it's animated. And that animation is nothing more but a time synchronized traversal to the horizontal of that rectangular sprite sheet. For those new to sprite sheet animation, that's sprite sheet animation in a nutshell. You got a sheet and you move it along like you would in a projector or a flip book based on a timing scheme and a sizing scheme for the rectangle. And you could scale it however you want. I can go into more detail later when I do implement more advanced features of animation, but for now, I have the feature done. That was a big step, and the next step is to scale it up. And with the animation portion done, I decided I want to do another proof of concept because the scaling up piece doesn't require much brain power. It's just maintenance. In my perspective, it's maintenance. So to that point, the second feature I implemented was UI. Up till now, if you selected a unit, you had to commit to moving the unit. But your player options ought to be available to you, and if you don't like your options, you should be able to undo that action. So, you can now. You can move, well, technically no, I only implemented the move option, but I'm going to go work out before I do that. You can move, you can attack, or you can undo and reconsider what you want to do with that unit. And note that you do use the same cursor, but the cursor moves, changes functionality, and then returns. Now, in this case, it didn't actually do a move because technically my cursor was outside of the movable area, and that's good. You don't want to be able to move where you can't move, otherwise the game's broken. And what you also see here is that there are two cursors. Now, those of you familiar with the cloning aspects of C++ language, that's exactly what I utilized. I developed a clone method that constructs for a pointer of the same type a clone of a unit. Then I says do what I want with that temporary unit, and then once the state machine exits the action menu, it returns back to unit select menu, and if it's a viable move, you make the move. If you don't want to move, you undo it, you return the pieces to where they were, and then if you want to attack, you simply implement the attack protocol and go from there. Very straightforward, very simple from a design perspective when you lay it out in a simple fashion, but this is a drastic improvement from what I used to do in previous engine in C#, which itself is also a drastic improvement from what I used to do back in 2009 in my tinkering days. Add that to the fact that I'm implementing this in very short sprints on weekends, I'm looking forward to implementing further features in the future. Features to look forward to, besides scaling up the animation proof of concepts and the UI proof of concepts to something playable. I'm also looking forward to scaling up the dynamics of the game. Right now, I'm merely mimicking what you see in Advance Wars, and to its name, it is an Advance Wars clone. But once I get to a point where I'm comfortable with the cloning up those features in my own code base, I'll begin making it my own. And I have a number of ideas I'm looking forward to. And I will begin to talk about those and roll those out as I get more feature complete. Now, I was ideally aiming to get this out before the 2nd October deadline for this year's Indie Game Festival submissions, which is held at GDC 2018 down in San Francisco, March in San Francisco, if I recall correctly. But unfortunately, that will not happen. So I'll just keep on pushing, and hopefully, this will push before Christmas. I'm giving myself a faster deadline, but I'd rather produce a more polished game, and I definitely would rather produce something that people would want to play, not just something that's finished and say it's done. Thank you for following. I'll publish more in the future.